My name is Simon Parker, and as a travel writer and journalist, I've reported from some of the most extreme corners of the planet. I've sailed across ferocious oceans and trekked through some of the highest mountain ranges in an effort to document the power of Mother Nature.
Been absolutely destroyed by a landslide.
But now I'm embarking on my next epic journey at the gentle pace of a bicycle. From high above the Arctic Circle at the summit of Norway to the foot of the Scandinavian peninsula in Sweden.
Wow.
Over the course of my 2,000-mile adventure, I'll be learning about the natural cycles of the region as a green and fertile summer slides into the frozen grips of winter. I'll be searching for seasonal foods and elusive wild animals with the people that call this place their home. I'm passing through at a time of harvest and splendor, and I'm seeing it all on two wheels. This is Earth Cycle. I've now spent more than 1,000 grueling miles in the saddle, and I'm entering Sweden's fertile central counties. This is still a region of gigantic forests and stretches of open road, but there are now increasing signs of agriculture, and the never-ending sprawl of pine trees has been broken up by the occasional patch of ploughed fields. On this leg of my journey, I'll make sure to give Sweden's towns and cities a wide berth, before then heading out in search of some of the country's biggest and smallest creatures, and with a bit of luck, arrive just in time to sample some of Scandinavia's tastiest seasonal produce.
And this is another sign that Sweden, and in particular the farmers of this region, are preparing for autumn and the onset of winter. There's loads more tractors around, and this region really is a hive of activity.
In contrast to the sparsely populated expanse of Lapland, there are certainly more signs of life down here. The roads are, however, delightfully smooth, and it's never too hard to find a picturesque lay-by from which to enjoy a much-needed rest from the grind of cycling.
I have been flirting with the idea of potentially having a swim in one of these lakes on this trip, but it really is horribly cold, and I don't smell particularly good, but the idea of going in there is quite scary, to be honest.
For the time being at least, my pungent odour will have to remain. It's just one of those things you have to embrace on journeys like these. It's simply me, the open road, and my waft of BO, gently cycling past endless lakes and forests. And in our increasingly fast-paced and densely populated modern world, it feels nice to simply sit in the saddle and ponder the uninhabited landscape around me.
This really is a genuine North European wilderness. And as I cycle through here, I'm constantly amazed at how incredibly wild this place is. So I'm hoping it puts me in good stead to witness my next animal of my journey.
So far, most of Sweden's large mammals have proven almost impossible to find, but I'm hoping that having now successfully glimpsed beavers further north, my luck could be changing.
Hello, I'm Simon.
How are you doing?
Nice to meet you. I'm told you are the man who is most likely in all of Sweden to find a moose for me. And I've previously in my journey, I've been quite unsuccessful.
We've been doing it for 15 years, we never failed. But they're wild animals, so I hope that even tonight, we're going to see them. I'm pretty sure. Let's go. And look at them.
Mikael has been tracking moose in Mallingsbloklotten Nature Reserve for almost 20 years, and it's right now as summer moves rapidly into winter when they're at their most active. But nevertheless, finding one is still very much like searching for a needle in a haystack.
The moose is a big, giant animal, but they're vegetarians. They eat. Their favorite food is the grass in the forest, like we have here, right in front of us. What happened then, wintertime? There's no grass in the forest, there's no leaf on the trees. Then the moose starve, but they do eat. Let's go further here. Then they live on the Scottish pine, the small ones. So here you can see the moose has been eating here, the top of them.
So you can actually see here, the moose is that tall.
The back of the big moose is like our height, basically. But then they have the head on top of that. So they are like up to there, the biggest bull moose.
Riding through Sweden, I am very much just keeping very close to the road. I'm rarely going more than a few meters away from the tarmac. But actually coming out here, I get this genuine feeling of isolation, this genuine feeling of Sweden just being this massive wilderness.
It's Sweden's impenetrable greenery that makes such a perfect home for wild animals, but at the same time makes them so hard to find. We found some moose tracks, but so far no signs of the animals in the flesh. And as the day grows older, I'm starting to think that once again, this may be a species that eludes me on this adventure.
What do you love the most about living out here and being out here? What's so special for you?
I like the forest, I like the nature, and I think that's where we belong. I feel that I belong at this place, and a lot of visitors, they're feeling the same. They're telling me this is really where we belong, but they need to go back to towns, they need to go back to their work and the civilization, because that's the way we earn our income these days, most people.
It's just gone 6:30 in the evening, and dusk is now really starting to take hold. So we have jumped in the vehicle, and it's allowing us to cover even more ground, and it should give us a better chance of finding a moose.
I'm starting to think that I might never actually see a moose. But now, without any warning, here I am face to face with one of these giant creatures, standing 6 feet tall and gorging on leaves. There are over 400,000 of these elusive mammals in Sweden, but the country's dense forests make them extremely hard to see, and encounters like mine are often fleeting, but always exciting.
That was a really remarkable situation. For about 10 or 15 seconds, there was just this experience where we shared the gaze of the moose. I will never forget that.
Watching dawn break over rural Sweden every morning is proving to be one of the biggest highlights of my adventure. Flanked by spruce, pine and birch, I can see how the shorter autumn days are encouraging the emerald summer foliage to slowly take on a rusty golden tinge.
It really feels like I've been on the receiving end of some awful weather on this trip. But when the sun's out, cycling through Sweden really is glorious. I really am a morning person, and I've made a really good start on the day, cycling through these wild woodlands of central Sweden. And I'm here to meet a lady who has rejected the rat race of Stockholm and is living out here, and apparently she's my best chance of having a tasty breakfast, which as a morning person is by far my favourite meal of the day. You must be Helen. Hi, Helen.
Hi,
I'm
yes
Simon.
I am. Hi Simon, welcome.
This is a beautiful place.
Yes it is, isn't it?
And I'm told you are my best chance of getting breakfast out here.
I hope so anyway. We'll see, yeah.
Well, I'm following you. Where are we
Okay,
going?
I think we're going that way,
Okay,
okay?
that's it. So how do you know where to find them? Do they like certain areas more than others?
Yes they do. Some mushrooms like the pine trees, some mushrooms grow close to the birch trees, so yeah, it helps if you know that.
Is this a busy time for you, foraging for things in the forest and trying to find all those seasonal autumnal things?
Yes, it is. And I mean, everything is now. You have the lingonberries and all the mushrooms now. So now is the time to pick it.
And it's a good time for mushrooms, but it's also a good time for bugs and
Yes, yeah.
mosquitoes. They're all over us.
Definitely, you have one in your hair now.
I've been really lucky on this trip to experience these seasonal things which are happening for only sometimes just a month or two in the whole year. And I really am getting sucked into the whole excitement of this and foraging for something which is ultimately going to become my breakfast. So what is this, and how do you know it's that mushroom?
I guess it's a porcini, but to be absolutely certain, I have to lift it up and look at it. But I would be surprised if it's not.
And what do these taste like?
They are really, really good. So, do you want me to pick it up?
Yes,
and
please.
So we can see what it is. It's definitely a porcini. It's very firm and typical the brown color of the hat. Very nice, little one. Yes, it is very beautiful. And then I divide it. And then the last test.
Eat it raw. It's delicious.
Yes, it is.
I love mushrooms.
Yeah, yeah.
Mushrooms are really one of my favourite foods in the whole world. So this is just a little taste, but now what we're going to do is go and start a fire and fry them up and actually have some proper breakfast.
Foraging for wild mushrooms is one of autumn's greatest seasonal activities, but it is worth bearing in mind that 20% of them are poisonous. So if you're starting out like me, it's probably best to team up with a local expert like Helen. Our chanterelles and porcinis don't need a lot of added flavour. Just a knob of butter and a couple of cloves of garlic should do the trick, cooked over a few smouldering logs of birchwood and then served on a slice of bread with a few sprigs of parsley.
It's perfect. Stood in a Swedish forest eating freshly foraged mushrooms, and the sun is out. I'm not sure if it gets much better than this. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
My journey from one end of Scandinavia to the other has been full of simple pleasures, from the taste of autumn foods to the sight of sprawling uninhabited forests that ramble over every green horizon. I feel privileged to be seeing this wild place at a time of spectacular seasonal change, and all at the gentle speed of a bicycle. Coming up, my adventure continues onto Sweden's sunny west coast. I'll be discovering secluded beaches and hidden inlets before finding out how one of Europe's lesser known endangered species is slowly coming back from the brink. On my journey through central Sweden, I've been searching for giant moose in vast national parks and foraging for delicious porcini and chanterelle mushrooms. But now my adventure is taking me ever further south, and I'm following Sweden's craggy southwest coastline. On this stage of my journey, I'm never more than a few meters from the ocean. Winding into empty bays and through sleepy fishing villages, it seems like I'm zigzagging from one postcard setting to another. This windswept region is specked with thousands of granite islands that spend most of the year being battered by the elements. But today is no ordinary day, and as dozy cattle bask beside me in the warm sunshine and fishing boats sway in the gentle breeze, some of the ferocious weather I encountered further north is now all but a distant memory.
In the past 10 years, I've been extremely lucky to travel all over the world, and I've been to about half the countries on the planet now. And people always say to me, where's your favourite place? And I can only ever really narrow it down to about 5 or 10 countries. But after this trip, traveling all the way through Scandinavia, I can say that Sweden is definitely on that list.
The thing I love most about cycling through Scandinavia is just the immense sense of freedom. If you shut gates behind yourself, pick up your litter and treat the place with respect, then within reason you're free to explore to your heart's content. Scandinavians seem to have fully embraced the idea that being outside is not only good for staying physically fit, but it's also extremely good for the soul.
It's moments like this and experiences like this which have really punctuated this whole trip for me. Finding isolated and secluded spots like this, just to take 5, 10 or 15 minutes just to relax, have a cup of tea, a snack, and just breathe the whole place in. And throughout this whole massive adventure, I don't think I've really found anywhere quite as perfect as this.
Despite this being a cycling adventure, some parts of Scandinavia are certainly best explored by boat, and I'm hitching a ride to the country's most westerly islands with the help of a local fisherman. On journeys as long and as epic as these, sometimes it's best to have a change of perspective. And while the weather islands are renowned for having some of the windiest weather in Northern Europe, I've been told that their isolation also makes them prime real estate for Swedish conservationists.
Well, it seems to have taken me an awfully long time, but I've made it to the west coast, and for a few miles at least, I'm on the water, and I'm on my way to meet one of Sweden's most endangered animals.
This remote archipelago of 365 tiny islands has been left almost entirely uninhabited by people. However, that's what makes it so appealing to wildlife, and especially to a species that needs a helping hand.
I'm Simon.
Hello, I'm Charlotte.
Nice to meet you, Charlotte.
Hello, Anders.
Anders, nice to meet you. This is a very beautiful place, and I'm hoping you're going to help me see this very endangered Swedish species.
Yes.
Charlotte and Anders have been charged with the task of saving one of Europe's most endangered insects, the Nordic brown bee. Very few people keep them these days, and they're coming under increasing threat from imported yellow honeybees, swarms of which are muscling in on the native bees' precious Scandinavian habitat.
I think this is one of those examples of having all the gear and absolutely no idea. But I'm hoping that these two are going to help me not get stung, and I'm extremely excited to find out what goes on here.
This is a small mating hive. It's designed to mate queens.
The weather islands may only be 10 miles or so from Sweden's west coast, but it's far enough to mean that these Nordic brown bees can remain safely isolated without the risk of cross-breeding with the mostly introduced bees from the mainland.
This is heavy
Yeah,
with honey,
yes.
and I must admit, I absolutely love honey.
We're gonna get you a piece.
I hope so.
Yeah, we're gonna get you a
I
piece.
am salivating
Yeah.
just looking at this. I
Yeah,
can almost smell
Yes.
just how sweet it is.
Right now during autumn, Charlotte and Anders have a short window in the bees' annual life cycle in which to prepare these fragile creatures for the harsh winter that's just around the corner.
Can you tell me what your project is about and what the idea of your project is?
We're out here only to make more Nordic bees, and it's most important to have places like this, or else they will go extinct. There was, I think, 10 to 16 queens in 1998 left in Sweden, and I think today they are about 500 or 600 purebred.
Why are bees so important?
They are important for biodiversity. They help trees and wild berries and fruits, and also then it gets helping the birds. They get more fruits. Einstein said that if the bees get lost and disappeared from the world, then the mankind will follow within 3 years. And I think perhaps that's right.
Throughout this trip, I have been unbelievably lucky to meet people who are incredibly passionate about what they're doing, and this is no exception. And to open these beehives and get this very candid perspective on a world that's going on all around us, this is definitely one of the highlights of this whole adventure.
One of their most important jobs is to make sure that each hive has a precious egg-laying queen, the sole female responsible for ensuring the survival of the swarm for another year.
And now we're going to give her a bit of a dot. There. And now they say hello to her. So, this one, home.
This one's a good one.
This one is a success.
In order to make it through the cold winter, the bees will need to live off the honey they've spent all summer creating. But each hive can end up with a massive surplus of this sweet and sticky treat. And that's exactly how busy bees and hungry humans have learnt to get on for hundreds of years.
And that is absolutely weighed down with honey. How much honey do you think is in here?
I think
weighs
1.5 to 2 kilos.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. But let's put it in here before they wise
they
up to
try
it.
to take it back again, yes.
As we just come into dry land and this portion of my adventure through Sweden comes to a close, it's time to take on the fruits of our labour and a few sweet calories, which will hopefully push me on right to the southern tip of Sweden. Thank you very much. Delicious. I want some more.
I'm now almost at the end of my epic journey, cycling the length of the Scandinavian peninsula while charting the seasonal cycles of the natural world around me. I've covered a staggering 1,500 miles so far, from Norway's frozen Arctic to the sun-kissed southern reaches of Sweden. Next time, I'll be sampling some of the planet's freshest seafood and following one of Europe's hardiest fish on its annual migration. I'll meet people celebrating one of the most delicious fruits of autumn before then locking them up for the long winter ahead.